You have been told your entire life that falling into debt is your personal failure, that you spent too much, planned too little, lived irresponsibly. But what if I told you none of that is true? What if the system isn't trying to prevent debt, but is actually designed to create it, not accidentally, not by mistake, but intentionally, because debt is the most efficient form of control ever invented. A person drowning in debt is easier to direct, easier to silence, easier to keep busy. And a person who truly owns their time, their choices, their life, that person is impossible to control. Today, we uncover the truth they never want you to understand. This story does not begin in the modern world. It begins centuries before banks existed. In the Middle Ages, European peasants called serfs were not chained slaves, but they were never truly free. Their chains had no metal. Their chains were economic. Serfs owned nothing. Not the land they worked on, not the mill they used, not the oven, the well, or even the forest. Every basic activity required payment to the Lord. To grind wheat, pay a fee. To bake bread, pay a fee. To gather firewood, pay a tax. Even hunting a rabbit was illegal because the animals belonged to the Lord. One bad harvest, one sick child, one broken tool, and the serf's only option was to borrow from the same Lord who controlled his life, at interest. A serf did not work for his family's future. He worked to pay endless manufactured debt that was never meant to be repaid. Does that sound familiar? Because the structure has not changed as much as you think. A medieval serf surrendered about 30% of his labor to the Lord. Today, the modern worker pays 30 to 40% in taxes alone. Then mortgage, student loans, car payments, credit cards, insurance, fees, utilities before you even begin living your life. 60 to 80% of your income is already claimed by someone else. You call it freedom, but the structure is the same. You work, you earn, and you hand most of it back to the system. This is not liberation. This is modern financial serfdom with better branding. To understand how powerful debt can be, you have to travel far back to the heart of ancient Rome. Rome was not just an empire of legions, marble temples, and unstoppable armies. It was an empire built on creditors, powerful men who controlled society not with swords, but with ledgers. In Rome, debt was not an inconvenience. It was a life sentence. If a citizen failed to repay what he owed, the punishment was swift and merciless. First, his property was seized. The tools he worked with, gone. The animals he raised, gone. The home he lived in, gone. If that wasn't enough, the land he inherited from generations before him was taken next, stripping a family of its identity and its future. And when there was nothing left to take from a man, Rome took the man himself. His body became collateral. This system had a name: Nexem deft bondage. Under Nexem, you did not negotiate. You did not bargain. You simply obeyed. You worked the creditor's fields under the burning sun. You served in his household, a living reminder that one mistake could turn a free citizen into a servant overnight. And if you died before repaying, the chains did not break. Your children would inherit your balance. A single financial error had the power to curse an entire bloodline. Families lived in constant fear. Farmers, soldiers, merchants, no one was safe from the weight of debt. For centuries, Rome faced the same crisis again and again. The poor demanded relief. The elites demanded obedience. Should the debts be forgiven to prevent rebellion or enforced to maintain control? Every generation, the Senate had to choose. And almost every time, they chose control. The result was predictable: riots, revolts, civil unrest, frozen social mobility, and widening inequality. Rome was tearing itself apart from the inside. By the time foreign armies arrived at its gates, the empire was already weak and rotting under its own economic pressure. Rome didn't collapse simply because of invaders. It collapsed because inequality hollowed it out from within. It's because ordinary people were ground down by a system that valued wealth more than stability. Debt destabilized the greatest empire the world had ever seen. And those centuries passed, those in power never forgot the lesson. Control the debt, and you control the people. In the 19th century, a new version of slavery appeared. The company town. Workers were paid not in real money, but in company-issued tokens called scrip. This scrip could only be spent at company-owned stores, where prices were outrageously inflated. In the nearby city, bread cost 10 cents. In the company store, it cost 25. Every month, workers ended up deeper in debt owed to the same company that controlled their housing, their job, their food, and their future. They were legally free, but economically trapped. As the old song said, 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. These were invisible chains, but the cage was just as real. After World War II, world leaders understood one truth: debt can destroy nations. So they forgave national debts. They rebuilt Germany. They created stability. But while countries were saved, individual citizens were pushed into the opposite direction. For the average person, wages froze. Costs rose. Homes became expensive. Education became unaffordable. And the solution offered: loans. Can't afford college? Take a loan. Can't buy a house? Take a mortgage. Need a car? Finance it. Struggling with groceries? Put it on a credit card. A whole generation was quietly transitioned from earning-based living to long-based survival. Inflation is not just prices going up. Inflation is a weapon. If you have cash, inflation destroys your savings. If you have assets, inflation multiplies your wealth. If you have debt tied to appreciating assets, inflation helps you. But the average person does not have that kind of debt. They have car loans that lose value, credit cards with insane interest, student loans that cannot be discharged. Inflation punishes the poor twice: once through rising prices, and again through rising debt. In 2008, banks gambled and lost. When they fell, they were rescued. Ordinary families were not. Millions lost homes. Banks received bailouts. Executives received bonuses. Then came 2020. Trillions were printed. Markets soared. The rich became richer. Everyone else, higher rent, higher groceries, stagnant wages. This was not a rescue. This was a wealth transfer from the public to the elite. Today, the system no longer needs iron chains. It doesn't need guards, whips, or prisons. It has something far more powerful: contracts. Contracts that look harmless on paper. Contracts that promise opportunity. Contracts that millions sign without ever realizing what they're giving away. Student loans that follow you like a shadow. Loans so strict that even bankruptcy, the last escape, cannot erase them. You can lose your job, lose your health, lose everything you own. But the debt remains, patiently waiting for you. Mortgages that bind families for 30 years. A lifetime commitment disguised as home ownership. For 3 decades, you don't truly own your home, the bank does. Miss a few payments, and the place you've built your life in can be taken back without mercy. And credit cards. The silent traps of the modern age. A single mistake, one emergency, one missed payment, and suddenly interest turns a small problem into a punishment that lasts for years. What used to be a $200 expense slowly mutates into a $2,000 burden. People think they are paying for convenience, but in reality, they are paying for submission. In the medieval world, the serf worked for the Lord. He tilled the fields, harvested the crops, and surrendered his labor to someone who owned everything. Today's worker does the same, but now the master is invisible, not a person, but an interest rate. A number on a screen that quietly dictates how you live, how you spend, how long you must keep working. Different tools, different language, different symbols on paper, but the result exactly the same. The many work endlessly, tirelessly, faithfully, so that the few at the top never have to work at all. The system doesn't merely tolerate your debt. It requires your debt, because debt is control. A debt-free person is unpredictable, independent, powerful, and true freedom is something the system cannot afford. If this awakens something inside you, subscribe, because history holds the answers. I'm just showing you where to look.